Hello, Cynthia. Welcome to the Sacred Remembering podcast.
Hi, Sarah. It's wonderful to be here and to meet you and to be able to share what we do.
Yeah, whatever comes forward. It feels very familiar to be sitting here with you. I'm not sure exactly why that is. Maybe because I've been reading your book, but who knows exactly why. But so you've written a book, but more than that, you've really done a really big thing. And it's really an honor to have you here and to share your story on sacred remembering. And um, I can't wait to hear what we discover and to share this mission with listeners. So my first question for you to start to enter into this story, this epic that you have lived. What are the Earth Treasure Vases?
Okay, well, jumping in, the Earth Treasure Vases come from the Tibetan Buddhist tradition originally, brought forward in the 8th century by a great Lama, teacher, mystic, being called Guru Rinpoche or Padmasambhava, who was a kind of, capable of seeing into the future. And he brought forward many practices in his lifetime. But one of them was this practice of the Earth Treasure Vases, which was considered a treasure teaching in the Tibetan language. That's called a terma. And those teachings, there's many of them, but those teachings are intended for the times when they're needed. So while he brought it forward, it was hidden until such a time as, the world really needed it. And so there are figures in that lineage of the Tibetan Buddhist lineage called Tertan, who are those who can have access to such things and reveal them when the time is ripe. And so many of these these Teratans have a prior connection to the actual time of Padmasambhava's lifetime when they were also there, for example. But there's a lot of ways in which these teachings are revealed. And anyway, this is one of them. And it really started to come forward in sort of the industrial age, But in more recent times, many of the lamas in Tibet have, or in Nepal or wherever they are now, have realized that this practice is really definitely intended for these times when our relationship to the earth is so challenged. And so the treasure vases are, they're little clay pots that are filled with offerings symbolic of healing and protection for the earth. And in our case, the clay was mixed with sacred substances connected to all the lineages of many, many masters going back all that time, back to the time of the Buddha, actually, which is even older than Padmasambhava's period. And so then they're consecrated, and traditionally they're made and filled with these offerings and then consecrated by the monks in the monasteries, sort of behind the closed doors of that world. And then they're taken out to places that need healing and protection. So we were lucky because that's not how it happened for us. So that's kind of the overview briefly of the practice, but I could now, if you're interested, go into how I received these.
Yes, I of course would love to hear that. And so you've mentioned and presenced Buddhism a lot. And so if you would also like to share how this has been your path and how you ended up on that mountain, in the story that you are about to share and what you share early on in the book, where you were given this practice of the Earth Treasure Vases. Like,
Okay.
how did you come to it?
Well, so I was interested in Buddhism from a young age, and met first. I met many teachers, but then one of my early teachers was Thich Nhat Hanh, who is a Zen master from Vietnam, who teaches or taught. He's no longer alive, but I was very close to him, knew him for many years, and did a lot with him over time, and am a teacher in his lineage, actually.
Mm,
Um, he he brought this notion of what he called engaged Buddhism, which is really like, it's one thing to practice meditation, sort of in the comfort of your own home, which
yeah.
is not to be underestimated. But he also encouraged his students to engage with our caring and our compassion in active ways in the world. And he came out of the Vietnam War, so the peace movement was a big part of his life and teachings. And
Mm,
he's the one who also brought forward a term called interbeing, this notion that we're all connected in this experience of interbeing with each other and
mm,
with the earth and with all life and everything. And so his order is actually called the Order of Interbeing, which I'm also a member of and have been since the mid 1980s.
mm,
Um, so Thich Nhat Hanh was an early teacher, and then I began to encounter the Tibetan Buddhist lineages, and received teachings and empowerments and stuff from many of the great teachers of actually of the previous century. Um, and at a certain point, so I did a lot of deep practice and stuff, but then at a certain point, I had the great fortune of meeting this old 100-year-old Lama living in a cave in a remote part of Nepal, who's the one who gave me the practice of the treasure vases. So maybe as we're talking, I can share more about where all this has led me, because I started in a very traditional way, but it's evolved over the course of my life. It's been 35 years since I met the old Lama in the cave. I like to call him the old wise man in the cave, because that's exactly who he was. And, it was just such a amazing opportunity. But anyway,
yeah.
it's, go ahead.
I would love to hear whatever you want to share. And I'm also remembering the part in the book where you were talking about like walking up the mountain to meet him. And you were like listening for the question in your heart, listening for the question that you wanted to ask him. And, I can just feel that like your human thinks, I got to find the perfect question. Right. But then your soul is up to something way bigger, right? So you add like 35 years worth of bigger.
Yeah.
Um, so what was going on in you when you're talking about this? You called it engaged Buddhism. Was that, yeah, this engagement and social activism and like what did you care about? Like what were you up to at that point in time, and what were you questing? What were you asking?
Well, I think I was really deeply seeking the purpose of my life.
Mm,
And I had been exposed to a lot of um, teachings, but also a lot of concerns about what was happening to the earth. And one of those was, I live here in Santa Fe, New Mexico, basically right across the Rio Grande Valley from the Los Alamos National Laboratory, which is the place where they developed the first atomic bombs and are still creating components of nuclear weapons, much to my dismay. But I had realized and learned a lot through a woman you may know named Joanna Macy, who is one of my great teachers as well. And at that time this was in the sort of late 80s, early 90s, she started really talking about nuclear guardianship and the need to protect the earth from these substances that radioactive substances that totally change the fabric of life on earth and stuff. And so that was a big awakening for me, to realize, the extent to which we are damaging the web of life. And so there were a lot of factors at play. I think of engaged Buddhism also in the way of like sacred activism. Like what are we called to? What's our calling? What the book is called Summoned by the Earth. So for me, it was a summons, but it's a calling. And I think we all have the capacity when we're quiet, or wake up in the 3 o'clock in the morning and go, oh my God, it's like, what is that is, sort of pulling us along? And for me, I was barely getting in touch with it. And it wasn't until I was literally walking up this path in the highest mountains of the world with this amazing opportunity to go meet the proverbial old wise man in the cave that I realized, oh my God, I gotta come up with a really good question, because this is not an opportunity that everybody is given, And so what is it going to be? And I was kind of, working that out with each step and each breath going up the path. And then I began to feel, like the pain in my own body as I was putting myself through this strenuous trek. And I'm so in love with Mother Earth that I got in touch with her suffering, which is never very far away. And I realized that my question for the old wise man in the cave was, what can we do to bring healing and protection to the earth in these times? And this was 1990, so it was still a long ways, before now, when we're really dealing with it much more directly. But even back then, the signs were there. So that was my question. Yeah.
What can we do? And so he gave you the practice of the Earth Treasure Vases. Okay. And then this is the part where I also got summoned a few years ago. I was summoned by the earth and by these like inner earth grandmothers and this whole thing. And I was given directions. You're going to live this, you're going to write this, you're going to teach this. This is your work. And I've done that in some ways, and I have a lot to grow into, right? When you're like given your life's work. I'm aware enough that I got a long ways to go. And so there was this part in the book that, I mean, this particular question is a little bit selfish. Like, this is what I want to talk to you about today, among other things. But you received this and you knew it was yours to do. And then there was a period of like, I'm not ready yet. Or how in the world do I do this? Or like, and I want to go there for a moment if we could. And I know that may not seem like the most glamorous part of the story.
No.
But I think this place between the calling, the realization, the soul purpose, and beginning to truly live it out and carry it out and like become the person, the woman that lives with that every day. You've been doing this for 35 years, Could you talk about that period a bit, please?
Sure. No, I think that's a really, really good question, because so many of us are kind of caught between, oh, well, I would love to do XYZ, but I can't, or I'm not ready, or, and we all have to prepare for the calling,
Yeah.
and sometimes it takes us by surprise. We don't know, and we have to rearrange our lives, um, and become the vessel, right?
Mm, mm,
Like, here are these little clay pots that are these holy vessels that Joanna Macy named them that, and I love
mm.
that. And she said, it's really as if, because we don't really know what the little clay pot filled with prayers and offerings is going to do, although I can tell you some stories, but
Yeah.
really, we are the holy vessel. And so
Right.
it's a matter of connecting with ourselves in such a way that we become capable of being the
Mm,
vessel, being the vehicle. We answer the call. If we're lucky, we receive the call, we answer the call, and then we hone the vessel. So for me, I was totally overwhelmed with the assignment.
yeah.
I didn't even know what a treasure vase was. um, it was like I was coming with this pure heart of caring for the
Yeah.
earth, wanting to do what I could to bring healing to the places that needed it, which of course is everywhere. So it was like suddenly the whole earth was talking to me, and I was like, where do we even begin? I mean, the place that I was directed to go to have them made, the Lama there said, well, oh, sure. How many do you want? And I said, I mean, like, I stopped in my tracks. I didn't know what to say. 25? I don't know, like maybe 10,000.
Right.
Um, so it was kind of like that. And I received 30 of them initially. Later, I received another 40. We made another about 30 more. And,
Mm,
it's like it just has evolved. But back then, they arrived about a year later in these trunks from Nepal. And there I was with 30 of these little clay pots ready to go to work, and they're not supposed to sit around and like
mm.
look good. They're supposed to go to work. They're
Yeah.
engaged with the purpose of healing for the earth.
Yeah.
So, but this was like I didn't know what to do. So I put them aside for probably about 5 years. It was just I couldn't deal with it. And
Mm,
in that process, I did a lot more of my own
yeah.
meditation practices, and like I said, kind of honing the vessel. I didn't even realize quite what I was getting myself into. But then we started having these forest fires and droughts, and the signs and omens began to reveal themselves about the imbalance that we're living with in
Yeah.
relationship to the earth in countless ways. And finally, because I'm a Dharma teacher, I have a group of people that come, and now is like all over the world online and everything. But back then it was just, here. And we began to pull them out and start to work with them. And
Mm,
it was really like just listening to our deepest hearts about where they were being called, and getting ourselves out of the way. I think one of the secrets, in a way, of responding to the call is to realize it's not about me. It's
mhm,
about something so much larger. And
mhm.
my work is to sort of get my little self out of the way so that I
Yeah.
can receive the instructions, and
I do.
operate in a way that is in response to something so much larger than myself, that
Yeah.
I would never have imagined, you know. But then the more we do that, the more the responsiveness comes.
Mm, mm.
Yeah. The more the
Beautiful.
path opens.
Yeah. Yeah. Gorgeous. Thank you for that answer. And I recognize that I am living that.
Yeah.
So great.
Yeah.
Yeah, for
I'm
sure
glad you
honing the
are,
vessel.
Sarah, because the earth needs all of us. This
Yeah,
is a time when we are all being summoned, actually. I feel that.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so to be willing to answer that call, it takes courage because, it does require transformation of a lot of our,
Mhm.
conditioning and a lot of things that are have got us into this mess.
Yeah,
So thank you for
absolutely.
answering the call.
Yes, yeah, thank you. All right, so where would you like to go from here? So you began to intuitively plant these vases within the earth.
Hmm.
Um, in such ceremonial ways, and you went all over the globe to do this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. We started in New Mexico in a place that I don't reveal the location of, but it's very close to the Los Alamos National Laboratory. And I consider that the center of the mandala. And actually, that each of the treasure vases that have been planted have created this global healing mandala. So
Mm,
each of the vases, their location is like a node on that
yeah.
mandala. And we started because the mandala is a symbol of the awakened heart mind and or a symbol of wholeness, and so which is the same as healing, and so that if you think of that as the center of the mandala, then we
Mm,
went to the north and the south and the east and the west to create the four directions around that center point here in this bioregion, the Rio Grande bioregion. So we went to the mouth of the Rio Grande the source of the Rio Grande where it begins, the
mm,
mouth of the Rio Grande where it empties into the Gulf, because the river systems are supposed to carry the prayers,
mm,
and
mm,
then on the top of the two mountains to the east and west here in this region. And the mountaintops are also, holy places. So um, we started in that way, and then they began to go out around the planet to all kinds of locations. And if you get the book, there's a list in the back of all the locations. Actually, there's
mm.
many more that have happened since the book was published only a year ago. But
Wow.
and there's a map in the center of the book with also
Mm,
photographs from around the world, and many of the stories of where this has gone are in the book. But first it was kind of me doing it, more or less on my own, sometimes with others, but we would always start here in a meditation that we do to this day every full moon to really, um, invoke the intention to bring healing and restoration to the earth. And I think the practice of doing this for these years, it really has invited me and everyone who's gotten involved to open our eyes to the suffering of the planet and to the
mm,
places where healing is called for in all the different ways. I mean, it's it takes a lot of different forms.
mm,
That the suffering and the imbalance that we're dealing with, identifying some of the core wounds that are in need of healing and the locations which are very strategic,
yeah.
for the sake of the whole mandala. And
Mm, mm,
and then from going into the suffering and hearing the cries of the world, then becoming that holy vessel, just completely opening to what is the healing. And so then we start putting our offerings into the vases, that are connected to what we're hoping for, what we're dreaming for, what we wish for, what we see is needed, not in a political sense at all, but in a sense of, what would be the medicine for this. And then people over time have come forward to join me. So it's not just me, it's many, many, many of us who are called to wanting to take one of these to a place that is special to them, you know, and not so much about like the medicine wheel in my backyard, but more like in relationship to the commons, to the places where we're
Mhm.
all affected by what is happening here, and then responding to that with just our love and our caring, which is the
Mhm.
best medicine, you know, and then realizing that we are connected, we are not separate, we're not separate from each other, we're not separate from the whole web of life, and that in light of that, you know, what's called for really is, um, you know, a collective awakening in these times. Like we're, and Thich Nhat Hanh, you may have heard, I don't know if you know who he was, but
Mhm.
a great, great teacher, who was the one who kind of said, the next Buddha will be a Sangha.
Yeah.
And you know, what that means is that we're all in this together. It's not going to be some savior coming in and rescuing us.
Right.
We've got to wake up to what's happening collectively.
Right. And
And
like we just passed the mark of Easter in the year, and it's like we're not waiting for the return of the man, Jesus Christ. Again, we're that's Christ consciousness. It's the return of Christ consciousness. So yeah, this next
yeah,
collective awakening, collective.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So did I interrupt you? Please
No,
continue.
go ahead. I'm
Okay.
happy to go wherever you want.
Do you relate to the word grid work?
I do. And the
Yeah.
mandala that I've described,
Yeah.
of all the nodes on the mandala of this
Great.
treasure vase global healing practice, um, has really created like a web. I sort of use that word web instead of grid, but
Grid. Okay.
when we do the meditation on the full moon, we do a visualization of, as if each of the treasure vases is radiating light out around the planet from the location into the area where it is in service, but connecting with this whole web
Yeah.
or grid of other treasure vases, holy vessels, whoever we are around the whole earth,
Right.
to bring these prayers and intentions into um, realization. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, it's connected to ley line. I mean, some of the Earth Treasure Vases, for example, we have a treasure vase at on the Nilotic Meridian in Africa. So we placed one at a place called the Blythe River Canyon at the base of the Nilotic Meridian in South Africa. And then we placed one, amazingly in close proximity, really, to the Great Pyramid, um, at the top of that whole meridian
Mm.
or
Mm.
ley line, you know. And
Yeah.
um, there's one in the region of Avebury in England, which is, of course,
Mm.
you know, a huge place for all many ley lines coming through, and you know, all the crop circles. You know, all we had a whole
Mm.
there's a whole chapter about that. And then they go into other places, like we have one on its way to Palestine. We have one buried in several in Congo. There's a treasure vase that
Mm.
went into Congo, Liberia, post Civil War.
Mm.
You know, there's just an array of locations and things, but each one of
Mm.
those is creating this this web of light or life around
Yeah.
Mother Gaia. So I don't know
Yes.
where you were going to go with that around grid work, but that's my experience and where we've gone with it.
Yeah. Thank you. That's a word that I use, and I'll share that when you talk about it, and when I think about all of these earth treasure bases all around the globe, and you're talking about the connectivity and just the magnitude of what you and your sangha have done. Before we started recording, I was brought to tears when I began to thank you for it. And I feel myself tearing up again now, because it's like some part of me knows the magnitude of like what you've done. And I just, yeah, like it feels so big. Um, so yeah, I think we could use any number of words, but this massive intention and action. And I think I'd like to ask you about what your heart knows
Hmm.
about what these little vases do. You know?
Yeah, yeah. It's so amazing. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
because in a way, like the rational mind
right,
can't explain it. So a
right.
lot of people go, "Oh, really? Treasure vases? Uh-huh, right. How's that
Oh,
going to
yeah,
really help?"
right, right.
But I tell you,
Mhm.
things happen in a lot of different ways that we can't
Mm,
necessarily explain.
yeah.
And I recognized that when I received the practice. It was like, all right,
Mhm.
well, who am I to say how
Right.
this healing is going to happen, how these changes are going to take place? So this is what's coming to me. So okay, let's go. Um,
Mhm.
but over the years, the things that have happened, some of which are more tangible, therefore more easy to explain, but some of them are much less tangible, and yet still what I've witnessed in myself and in others who have taken them is the way in which everyone is transformed through
Mm.
aligning with this calling, this practice, these prayers. And when we do that, as you may know, the synchronicities start happening. One thing leads to another. It's like the breadcrumbs,
Mhm.
you can't help but get a literal call from someone who's got the connection to that place or that
Mm.
person or this offering or whatever it is that is needed to fulfill those prayers. And then you go, oh my God, this is so much bigger than I could have possibly, like you were just saying, possibly have imagined. And then you multiply that times 100, for example,
Yeah.
and each of these places is like vibrating with
Right.
intention and purpose and prayer and um, the offerings that are placed into the vases are also filled with healing properties and alchemical like interactions that again
Mhm.
you can't exactly explain, but it takes us out of the ordinary reality. It takes us out of our identification with linear time.
Mhm.
It puts us into what I call sacred time, where
Mm.
when you're in a ceremony, or a meditation or something, you kind of enter a state that is unconditioned
Yeah.
by ordinary reality, by time itself. Like sometimes you can go, wow, was I there for half an hour or 3 hours? You lose track. And it's like this whole thing. And then
Mm.
you start to realize that literally anything is possible,
Mm.
and that the changes that are called for, which are so massive that you can't even, imagine how it's all going to happen. But yet there's another sort of operating system
Yeah.
that can take over. And so, in the course of working with this, like holding a treasure vase filled with prayers and offerings, I've seen people who are even very cynical people who will hold one and go, oh, oh,
Mm.
it's like a living being.
Mm.
Oh, I can feel that. And then
Yeah.
they're so surprised. But yet, there it is. And it's,
Yeah.
it's like you have to treat it as if it were the most holy object, that does have a purpose. And your purpose is to facilitate that, But now what's happening, I don't know if this is all answering your question, but this is
It's
where
all great. Yes. Just
it's
go.
taking.
Yes.
So now what's happening, we have probably, I have lost track. We have probably 70 Earth Treasure Vases in the ground, maybe more, that are already planted. And we have about 30 or 25, something like that, 20 in process that are being stewarded. And by the time we're done with this, we'll have 93. But we're looking to bring in another 15 so that we have 108 in the ground, which is kind of the sacred number for this tradition. And in other words, there's now so many in the ground, and we have often recited the whole liturgy of locations when we do this full moon meditation, just so you can kind of get the sense of it. But now what's starting to happen is that it's like there's one thing about the one vase here and there, but there's another whole experience in tuning into the, as you would say, grid of all of them operating together. Like, what's that?
Right.
What is the effect of that as a whole?
Yes.
So
And like
that's,
you said, like
yeah,
all of the people that aligned to the intention to make each one of those happen.
right.
Yeah, that love throughout. Please
Yes.
continue.
Yes. So we're tuning in, we're working more in a way with activating the whole now that there are these,
Yeah.
and there's other lineages of people who've been working with treasure vases, but those treasure vases are, like I said, they're usually made and filled by the lamas. So we don't have the opportunity to fill them ourselves with offerings, and
Yeah.
that process helps us to connect so much more deeply with where they're going. And also we leave them open so that people in those locations can also make their own offerings, and it becomes very alive for those in each of those locations. So yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Are there any in like the Blue Ridge? Like I'm in Western North Carolina. Are there any in Appalachia?
There's one in Tennessee.
Okay.
That's the closest. It's in the Blue Ridge Mountains, in eastern Tennessee. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, so it is a huge, it's huge, and it's been daunting, for that reason. But it's also like, as if, I often say, a new Dharma door has opened through this, that for me is like, in many spiritual traditions, you have the guru or the great teacher, avatar, whatever. And my own feeling, having carried this out all around the planet, all over the world, and now having all these other people also doing that in a way, not in a way, but in a very real way, Gaia is our greatest teacher in these times, that is calling for us to awaken,
Oh yeah.
to to respond, and to form this connection to the source of life, for the sake of life, to be sustained and to continue. And so when you look into the web of life, you see this incredible teaching that is beyond words. It's so magnificent how the web of life operates, and
Yeah.
how nature feeds us, sustains us, gives us everything. And so connecting and realizing that we're not separate from that, we are part of that, is the opportunity that we're living with today.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
One of there was like a theme in the book, and I haven't quite finished the book, but I don't know if you named it, but I took this note. So I don't know if I deduced it or if you named it in the book, but it felt like in the beginning there was, I could almost sense like the younger environmentalist who was like, how do we save the earth? Like, what does the earth need us to do so that the earth is okay? And then it feels like there was this evolution both into partnership and into love.
Yeah.
Not like, how are we going to save? Not like moving from this focus on destruction and like devastation into love and hope and community.
Yeah.
Would you
Yeah.
say so? Yeah.
Well, yeah, because focusing on what's not working, I mean, of course, we have to admit and come to
Yeah.
terms with that. But being locked into the polarity of the fight
Yeah.
isn't actually helping much.
No. I talk about
No.
that all the time.
I
All
know.
the time.
So
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
doesn't help. It
Opposition is a
doesn't help.
waste. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
so what is it? I have this wonderful friend and mentor here in New Mexico, Native American woman, elder, who always talks about feeding the spirit that you want to see in the world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And and the respect and the way of being that embodies that,
Yeah,
you
for
know,
sure. And
and that we've
most,
lost so much touch with. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, this podcast is primarily a female audience. And, the tagline is women waking up to the truth of who we are. And as we do that, and I think we're doing that more and more in conjunction with the land, I'm talking about that more on here, but sometimes it's hard not to be angry. And it's hard
Mm-hmm.
not to like want to fight. And yet, it, you really can't, shouldn't, like we should not give our energy to that oppositional force anymore. Like that's the trauma, that is the separation, so
Mm-hmm.
um, yes, I'm continually talking about that because we can just do so much more with that, like journey back to our hearts and um, yeah, and the shift to service. And
Yeah, yeah. I think that's why it's so important to answer the call,
right,
whatever it
yeah,
is, because when we have that, we have our purpose. And I mean, I'll speak for myself. I was possessed. I was
mm,
so compelled to do this. And yes, originally it was like, okay, what can we do? We got to
mm,
do something. And I mean, it is still that, but
mhm,
it's gone from the striving
yeah,
to the embodying.
yeah, hmm,
And I met this old um, elder actually when I first went to Africa with the treasure vases. I had a dream about how the pathway to peace in this case in Liberia, which was coming out of this terrible civil war, was through the Dogon people in Mali, which is this very fascinating, very, very old culture that has connection to the stars. And, it's like, whoa.
mm,
And I had this dream, and I actually managed to get myself to Mali to meet this elder from the Dogon people who gave a divination
mm,
about the treasure vases and told me some things and did like
mm,
he was just a magnificent being. And I asked him, I said, what do I do about this urgency that I feel?
mm,
Which I think so many of us get caught in, whether it's urgency for the planet or just urgency in our lives, the way we
mm,
move and just are
yeah,
so like that. So he looked at me like, he didn't know what I was talking about. I mean,
Mm.
he did, but he said, because they live in such a traditional way, very, very close to the earth.
Mm.
He said, urgency. We don't really have that here. And my mind stopped because I realized in that moment that that way of living is not helping at all.
No.
And so I come back to that over and over again because whenever I get caught in thinking I got to do, and of course I'm possessed, so I'm a doer, and I go to that place. But there's another way of being that Marion Naranjo has shown me, which is, and other elders, because I've sought the blessing of elders all around the world, that we need to stop and take care and return to a way of being that is honorable and
Yeah.
respectful, you know.
Yeah.
And out of that, the steps they become clear of
Yes.
what we need to do,
Right.
but we're not reproducing the problem. We're doing it in a new
Right.
way.
Yeah.
So it's
Beautifully
not
said.
like I don't get angry at what's happening in the world, because I do. And
Yeah.
I'm ashamed and despairing at the rapidity with which things are devolving right now. After 35 years of doing all of this, it's heartbreaking. But does it help to, it's like in Buddhism we talk about samsara. It's cyclic existence.
That's
You
right.
know how
Yeah.
things go around and around and around and around, and they never get anywhere. And so, what do I need to do to not reproduce that old
Yeah.
story?
Yeah. Yeah.
I,
I'm very much living a couple of things that you just said, but the last podcast that I published was on making change from the yin. And I've just deepened into, I thought I was introverted and quiet. And this is like a whole other level of that. And exactly what you said, like what's arising from that space is new information
yes,
and new guidance, which is truly such a relief, because they're just speaking about this thing called, mission or purpose and being summoned, there was a feeling of like, am I getting it right? Am I
mm-hmm.
doing it yet? I'm still suffering. Can I suffer and do it at the same time? Just like all of these, no, partially rooted in the relationship with time. Like, am I going slow or am I trying to push too fast?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
then like honoring. And the more quiet I get and the more I don't have that relationship to the push pull of time,
Mm-hmm.
the more beauty in the process is just naturally unfolding.
Truly, truly, truly. Yeah. We make it so hard for ourselves, you
We do.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, before we hit record, you said, well, tell me a little bit about yourself. And I said, I'm here for the return of feminine sovereignty on and in the earth. And I haven't made it to the end of the book yet, but you mentioned that there's a chapter at the end of the book that ties into that feminine sovereignty. And I'm wondering if you'd like to share that story before we close.
Yeah. Yeah. That'd be great, because it's connected to what we were just talking about around samsara, this cyclic
Yeah.
existence, and actually, um, I think that being, embodied on earth
Mm-hmm.
is like the big the big thing here, actually, I think it was, I read this most incredible quote from Pope Francis this morning,
Mm.
that he wrote in the hospital. And I'm pretty sure it was in there. Look for it because it's just beautiful. Um, it was about, when we come to Earth, we the opportunity is to learn, and learning involves suffering. It just does. There's no escaping it. We might wish that we were all perfect, but actually that's not what happens here. So we're going to keep coming up against the suffering, and we sure are. And
Yeah.
it comes around and around and around, but it's how we relate to that that is, you know what we need to learn, and how not to contribute to it anymore.
Right.
So in any case, one of the Earth Treasure Vases more recently um, was dedicated, and I was the one. This was kind of one of the last ones that I did. I took a group with me, but I was feeling very called to wanting to steward a treasure vase to as an offering to Gaia herself.
Yeah.
And the place where
Mm.
Gaia is the name for the earth from the Greek. And she is known to have resided in Delphi, which is, a great sacred site in ancient Greece that was the home of the oracle. And the oracle of Delphi became very famous. And originally, the oracle of Delphi was it was a group of priestesses, of women who were uh, living in close relationship with Gaia and caring for her and for her spirit, and making all those offerings and doing what we need to do to stay in balance. And she would speak through them as oracles,
Mm.
and people would come to receive guidance from Mother Earth.
Yeah.
And so her offspring, there's several versions of the story, but her child was the serpent,
Mm.
and the python. The priestesses were known as the Pythia. And so, the snake is connected to the earth and to that primal, you know, energy
Yeah.
that we embody when we're in touch with these energies. But the story goes that the god Apollo, who was highly revered at a certain point, this all started long before the Greek gods came along. But they came along and they were very patriarchal and very power oriented and abusive, if I may say so.
Oh, yeah.
And Apollo took it upon himself to kill the python
Mm.
and take power over the oracle, so
Mm.
that the temple that was then built and is still there is connected to, and it was the oracle that connected to Apollo and not to
Mm.
Gaia. So if you look, across time, you can see how this has happened all over the world, right?
Yeah.
And so I wanted to go because over the course of time, and I write about this in the book, my own Dharma practice evolved,
Mm.
and I actually had a practice come to me of the sublime Mother Gaia with a mantra and a visualization and the whole thing, which I teach now.
Mm.
And I wanted to go and make an offering of one of the treasure vases to Gaia in that
Wow.
place. And we went, a group of us went, and it was just incredible. And when we got there, we visited a site that's adjacent to the temples of Apollo, called the Temple to Athena Pronea. And it's it's very unusual to have a round temple in ancient Greece, and a lot of those temples are rectangular usually. And I was there with the treasure vase. I'd been having this feeling like something's trying to get my attention. And when I sat down in front of this temple and I had the treasure vase with me, but I was like gazing across time. And it was as if, the portal opened and I saw myself as one of these priestesses at that temple serving Gaia. And then, we were all together. There were many of us there, and we were doing the work of sweeping the floors and gathering the offerings and tending the land and doing all of those things that keep the balance alive and serving her. And it was so beautiful, And then I had this experience of realizing that at that very time that I was re-experiencing that I could feel the presence of the power over paradigm of the violence of that coming in to take over this way of being and to claim it and take power over it and use it for the advancement of their own power and all of that. And it was horrible because at first it was seductive, then there were swords, and then there were guns, and it was just like throughout time. And how I had always carried this this commitment because it was a vow, to take care of her and of the web of life and of the balance that we need in order to sustain life on Earth. So I saw all of it and I felt all of it in my core. And I was weeping, with the realization of what has happened over time and keeps happening, So it was in that spirit that we made the offering to her, and that we that I claimed even more strongly the calling to serve Gaia and to bring forth this practice that I mentioned, the Sublime Mother Gaia, and to make a shift, because inside of the Buddhist world also, and like all of the spiritual traditions, there's just such a way in which there's such this hanging on to the power and to the patriarchal hierarchical system that is no longer appropriate. It's no longer serving. And there's just this last gasp, hopefully last gasp. But the balance is needed in so many ways. So I really I've been turning, and I've turned away from the gurus, the hierarchies, the abuses that nobody wants to talk about, to another way of sharing these things. And so anyway, that's it.
Gorgeous. And the feminine reclamation. That's what I was like specifically.
Whether we're in male or female bodies, and it's like, but it's the balance and the respect, and we each have a role to play. And let's celebrate that. Oh my God, it's so beautiful.
Right. And I had an awakening about the grids, about the feminine currents that run through the ley lines, and the diamond heart grids, and the restoration of the grid network that holds the unity, but also holds the feminine, and bringing that feminine back from those places that it was held, so like
Mm-hmm.
the oracle of, I say Delphi,
Mm-hmm.
and those centers on the planet when the feminine was uh, just disrespected continually, as has happened over
Mm-hmm.
this course of time. It's like you got to think, well, where did that energy go, right? Who and what was using it, right? So that energy also got diverted in the earth. And so now what we're doing as women and the earth and all human beings, but I think
Mm-hmm.
particularly women and the earth, as we are healing, we're actually resurrecting the earth architecture, the grid architecture that holds that balance.
Mm.
And um, yeah, I imagine it's much bigger than you and I know. And I imagine our souls have been doing this for a very, very long time.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, bringing this back. And I'm with you too that, I have been naming the things that are harder to name, especially on this podcast, because this is my platform. It feels the safest to me. And so I've been doing that as I went through my own realizations of just how dark this was.
Mm-hmm.
And, just today, I was in a session with a woman who had this like really perpetual fear of the earth. I see this a
Mm-hmm.
lot. Like,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
women who can't connect their energy body to the earth, or they're afraid of the earth. And this is an example of where like we suffered these traumas where, our
Mm-hmm.
homes were taken, our temples were taken, our bodies were taken, our wombs, like all of
Mm-hmm.
these things.
Mm-hmm.
And I know even as I say that, it sounds really negative, because it is really negative, but it's like the both and of naming what has happened and reclaiming the peace, love,
Mm-hmm.
and unity um, that that was there originally, and
Mm-hmm.
is in Gaia's memory and is in our memory,
Mm-hmm.
um, to bring that back. So
I don't think
yeah,
you can hope to heal
yeah,
unless you're willing to go into what needs healing,
me too. I mean,
right?
that's
You've got
always
to be
my
willing,
stance. Yeah,
and you've got to be willing to experience it. And if it's, you know, traumatic and that has been carried for a long time, even intergenerationally, which
yeah,
it,
it
it
has.
is.
Yeah,
But even in this life, whatever. And we need the support of other people
yeah,
to do that work. It's hard to do it alone. In fact, it might be impossible to do alone.
right. Hmm. Yeah,
Uh, but nevertheless, if we can recognize that actually there is no separation between me and Mother Earth, or me and
right.
you, or me and the trees and my dog, and everything that's appearing before me, like, we're not separate.
Right.
Then as I do that healing for me, it is having an effect on the whole. It affects you. If we're in connection, you're going to feel it.
Yeah.
You're going to go through it. But so is the whole. And
Mm.
so the more of us who are willing to do that, not just for ourselves, I mean, we do it for ourselves,
Mm.
but we also have the awareness that we're doing it for something so much bigger.
Right.
And I believe that that is happening,
Oh yeah,
you know.
I'm very hopeful that it's happening. And
It's happening.
I see evidence that it's happening. And you've planted Earth Treasure Vases all around the world to help it happen. So,
Right.
Cynthia, thank you so much. We're going to begin
So
to wrap up. And again, thank you for your service to this planet and to generations forward and backward.
thank you. Thank you
And
for having me.
yeah, for your
Yeah.
devotion to this legacy that you have lived. So, everyone, please check out Summoned by the Earth by Cynthia Jurs. And Cynthia, where's the best place for people to purchase the book?
It's available everywhere. I have a couple websites. You can access those. This is what the book looks like, everybody.
Yes.
And it's pretty, substantial. It's a great read.
Beautiful.
It's a good
Yeah.
read. It's kind of a page turner, if I do say so. You can go to summonedbytheearth.org,
Okay.
or you can go to my fuller website, which is called GaiaMandala.net.
Okay. Great.
And then there's all kinds of other things that you can find there and ways to get involved. But yeah, it's available. It's an audiobook also.
Okay.
So, whatever your favorite, and if they don't have it in stock at your favorite bookstore, just ask them to order it for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there are these beautiful colored pictures throughout the middle.
Mhm.
There's this section of colored pictures that you can see parts of the journey and just to feel the sacredness of this. So thank you so much
Yeah.
for being here. Thank you. Thank you.
You're so welcome. I'm really delighted to have had this conversation. It's really rich, Sarah. Thank you. Yeah.